My marriage felt like a battlefield. My in-laws were the enemy, and my husband wouldn't take my side. I was trapped. We had been married for 3 years, Jeff and I, but if you asked me, it felt like a lifetime. We met in a small town where everyone knew each other's business, where whispers carried faster than the wind. Both of us, at 28, were trying to carve out our futures, and initially, it seemed like our paths were perfectly aligned. We worked for his parents, each of us in different arms of their family businesses. Those early years were blissful, not just in our marriage, but in my career as well. I found a sense of purpose and belonging in the agency they ran. The promises made to us on our wedding day that we would one day take over these businesses seemed like a dream come true. But then, everything changed at the end of 2024. Tragedy struck when Jeff's grandfather succumbed to a fierce battle with cancer. His passing left a void not just in our hearts, but in the fabric of our family dynamics. The inheritance he left behind, a house, became the center of a bitter conflict. Linda, Jeff's aunt, was named the trustee, and what should have been a straightforward process turned into a prolonged legal nightmare. She held the house hostage, and we found ourselves entangled in a court battle that consumed our lives. My in-laws' response to this was nothing short of a nightmare. They threw themselves into the legal fight, acting as their own lawyers, leaving me to run the business almost single-handedly. What was once a job I loved became a burden. I was isolated, overworked, and underappreciated. Their constant presence was replaced by erratic visits filled with tension and hostility. Their inability to separate work from their personal legal battles turned the work environment toxic, driving away 20% of our customers who chose the quiet anonymity of online services over the chaos we had become. The most relentless force in this storm was my mother-in-law. She was an expert at asserting her dominance, but only where it wasn't needed. Her attempts to micromanage a job she knew little about were infuriating. She had her own business to run, yet she couldn't stay away. Instead, she used her position to offload her responsibilities onto me, leaving me juggling too many tasks with no end in sight. Any attempt to discuss this with her ended in her reminding me that I was just an employee, nothing more. The sting of those words was a constant reminder that, despite being family, I was an outsider. Jeff tried to mediate, but his allegiance was clear. Despite his best intentions, he was torn and he wouldn't risk alienating his parents. Every time I raised the issue, he'd plead with me to understand, to hold on a little longer, promising that things would get better once the court case was resolved. But the resolution kept slipping further away, and with it, my patience and sanity. In November, I began searching for a new job. I needed an escape, a lifeline. My old employer reached out, offering me more pay and better benefits than I had ever dreamed of. It was everything I wanted, everything I needed to reclaim my life. But there was one catch. The job required relocating. In our small, tightly knit community, jobs were scarce, and opportunities like this were 1 in a million. But Jeff was adamant he wouldn't move. For him, our marriage was a cornerstone that couldn't be shifted, even if staying meant my continued unhappiness. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, each path shrouded in uncertainty. On one hand, there was my marriage, our life, our shared dreams. On the other, my career, my happiness, my future. The decision was mine alone, but the weight of it was crushing. I remember sitting in our tiny kitchen, a place that used to be filled with laughter and warmth. Now it felt cold and unfamiliar. I held the job offer letter in my hands, the paper trembling slightly as if it too could feel the gravity of my decision. I thought about the promises Jeff and I had made to each other, the life we had built, and the life we could no longer sustain. The idea of leaving him, of ending our marriage, was terrifying. Divorce was a word I never imagined would be part of my story. It felt like a failure, like admitting defeat. But as each day passed, the prospect of staying felt more like a prison sentence. I was suffocating, and the only way to breathe again was to break free. I replayed countless conversations in my mind, trying to find the exact moment things had gone wrong. Was it really the court case that had driven us apart? Or was it simply the revealing of cracks that had always been there, hidden beneath the surface? When I finally approached Jeff with the decision, it was one of the hardest conversations of my life. I sat across from him, trying to find the words that wouldn't break us more than we already were. I told him about the job offer, the chance for a fresh start, and how much I needed it. I explained that I couldn't keep living in a situation where I felt undervalued and trapped. He listened silently, his eyes fixed on the table, his hands clasped tightly together. I hoped for understanding, for some kind of acknowledgement that my happiness mattered. But when he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with resignation. He couldn't leave. His ties to his family, to his parents, were too strong. I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. We were at an impasse, two souls, once intertwined now drifting apart. It was a moment of clarity, a painful realization that sometimes a love isn't enough to bridge the gap between two people's hopes and dreams. In the days that followed, the decision settled over me like a heavy cloak. I moved through the motions of preparing for a new chapter, each step both liberating and sorrowful. I packed my belongings, each item a reminder of the life we had shared. As I closed the door to our home for the final time, I paused to take one last look around. It was a place filled with memories, both beautiful and bittersweet. Starting anew was daunting, but it was also a chance to rediscover myself. The job, the move, these were steps toward reclaiming my identity, my independence. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk. I was hopeful that, in time, Jeff would understand and perhaps find his own path to happiness. Reflecting on it now, I realize that sometimes choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. It's about honoring who you are and what you need to thrive. The decision to leave my marriage was one of the hardest I've ever made, but it was a step toward a future where I could truly be happy, even if it meant going it alone. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, I found myself navigating a new world, one without the familiar comfort of Jeff's presence, but with the promise of rediscovery. The transition, as anyone might expect, was not without its challenges, but there was a strange sense of empowerment in the uncertainty. I moved to a small apartment in the city where my new job was located. It was a modest place, much smaller than the home Jeff and I had shared, but it felt like a blank canvas, ready for me to paint my new life on it. The first night I spent there, I lay on the floor, surrounded by unpacked boxes, and listened to the hum of the city outside. It was a symphony of unfamiliar sounds, cars honking, people talking, the distant wail of a siren. Yet, amidst the chaos, I found a sort of peace. Work was a welcome distraction. My days were filled with meetings, projects, and the kind of challenges that reminded me why I loved my career in the first place. Being part of a team that valued my input and appreciated my efforts was invigorating. My new colleagues were warm and welcoming, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like an integral part of something meaningful. There were moments, of course, when doubt crept in, late at night or during quiet moments when my mind would wander back to Jeff and the life we left behind. I would wonder if I had made the right choice, if I had given up too easily. But then, I would remind myself of the person I had become, someone stronger and more self-assured than before. One afternoon, while sorting through some old emails, I stumbled across a message from Jeff. It was a simple note, devoid of any bitterness or blame. He wrote about how he was doing, how his parents were coping, and how he hoped I was finding happiness in my new life. His words were kind, and they brought a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. I replied, thanking him for reaching out and sharing a little about my new job in the city. We exchanged a few more messages over the next weeks, each one a reminder that while our paths had diverged, the respect and care we held for each other remained intact. It was comforting to know that our story didn't end with anger or resentment, but with mutual understanding and a quiet acceptance of our new realities. As time passed, I began to carve out a life that felt authentically my own. I explored the city, discovering hidden gems in local cafes and bookstores. I joined a yoga class, something I'd always wanted to do, but never found the time for. I even started volunteering at a community center on the weekends, helping organize events and workshops. Each new experience was a reminder of the freedom I had gained, the ability to shape my own destiny. In quieter moments, I would reflect on the lessons this journey had taught me. The most profound realization was that happiness isn't just about being with someone else. It's about being at peace with yourself. It's about making choices that align with your values and aspirations, even when those choices are difficult and come with a cost. One evening, as I watched the sunset over the city skyline, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. For the first time in a long time, I was content. I was proud of the woman I had become, of the courage it took to choose a path of uncertainty over a life that felt stifling and unfulfilling. The road ahead was still unwritten, filled with possibilities I couldn't yet imagine. But with each passing day, I grew more confident in my ability to navigate whatever came my way. I had learned that sometimes the most important relationship you have is the one with yourself, and nurturing it was the key to true fulfillment. As I stood there, taking in the beauty of the moment, I knew that my journey wasn't just about leaving something behind. It was about moving towards something greater. It was about embracing the unknown and trusting that no matter what, I would find my way. And in that realization, I found a peace that no court case, no job, and no external validation could ever provide. It was a peace that came from within, and it was mine to keep. The journey of rebuilding and rediscovery had become my new normal, and with each passing day, I was learning to embrace it more fully. There were mornings when I woke up with a buoyant sense of excitement, eager to see what lay ahead, and evenings when I found solace in the quietude of my own company, savoring the freedom to just be. Living in the city had its challenges, of course. The hustle and bustle could be overwhelming, especially for someone who had grown accustomed to a quieter, more predictable pace. But there was an energy here, a pulse that seemed to sync with my own newfound rhythm. I was beginning to understand the allure of urban life, the diversity, the opportunities, the endless possibilities that stretched beyond the horizon. Work remained a constant source of fulfillment. My role had expanded, allowing me to dive deeper into projects that ignited my passion. I was thriving in an environment where my skills were not just utilized but celebrated. My boss, a dynamic leader with a keen eye for talent, often praised my contributions and entrusted me with responsibilities that challenged me in the best ways. It was refreshing to be seen for who I was and what I brought to the table, without the shadow of familial obligations looming over me. In moments of reflection, I would think about Jeff and the life we had shared. I would wonder how he was faring, whether he had found his own peace amidst the turmoil that had engulfed his family. Our occasional emails had dwindled, but there was a comfort in knowing that the line of communication was always open, should either of us feel the need to reach out. On weekends, I indulged in simple pleasures, browsing through farmers markets, attending local art exhibits, or losing myself in the pages of a good book at a nearby park. The city had become my playground, a place where I could explore and express myself freely. It was a luxury I hadn't realized I'd been missing, a chance to reconnect with the parts of myself that had been pushed aside in the chaos of my previous life. One afternoon, as I strolled through a bustling street fair, I was struck by a profound sense of belonging. This was my world now, a tapestry of colors, sounds, and experiences that were uniquely mine. The air was filled with the scent of street food, and laughter echoed around me as families and friends gathered to enjoy the festivities. Amidst the joyful chaos, I felt a calmness settle within me, a reassurance that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The decision to leave my marriage had been fraught with doubt and fear, but it had also been a catalyst for growth. It had forced me to confront my own desires, to take a stand for the life I wanted to lead. There was power in that choice, in acknowledging that sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that ultimately set us free. As the months rolled on, my life began to take on a new shape, one that was defined by my own aspirations and dreams. The fear of the unknown had been replaced by a sense of adventure, a willingness to embrace whatever came my way. I was learning to trust myself, to believe in my ability to navigate the complexities of life on my own terms. The city had become my home, a place where I could weave together the threads of my past with the promise of my future. It was here that I had found myself again, in the midst of the noise and the chaos, in the quiet moments of introspection and the vibrant tapestry of everyday life. And so, as I stood on the brink of a new chapter, I knew that my journey was far from over. There were still many paths to explore, many dreams to chase, and many lessons to learn. But for the first time in a long time, I was ready. Ready to embrace the unknown, to trust in the journey, and to savor the beauty of a life lived authentically and unapologetically. In the end, it wasn't just about leaving my marriage or finding a new job. It was about coming home to myself, about choosing a life that was aligned with my values and aspirations. And in doing so, I had discovered a strength within me that I never knew existed, a strength that would carry me forward no matter what the future held. New stories drop soon.